We good? Okay. Welcome, everyone. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion to approve the agenda for the business meeting of August 8th, 2022.
And Duncan and Jay.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have the district-wide school safety plan public hearing. I'm going to turn it over to Janet Maskman, our business official.
I just need to know if anybody has any, comments on it. Then we can continue.
Okay. Okay, we have the policy review, and just as a reminder, we have 3 policies. We have policy 4170, which is procurement regulations, which permits the use of piggybacking in general municipal law section. We have policy 6372, data security, and policy 7200, staff technology usage. Any comments or discussion? This will be the second reading for them.
Tracy, there's no other changes other than what we discussed? That's fine then.
Correct. All right, then I'm going to move us on to the open forum. The 30-minute open forum is the time the board sets aside to hear in-person comments from the public. Comments may also be emailed in advance of the meeting prior to 4 p.m. on the date of the meeting, and state in the email if you would like your correspondence read out loud to Daphne Pearson, District Clerk at pearsond@greenvillecsd.org. This is an opportunity for residents to voice general concerns or compliments, especially about items on the agenda. However, this is not the time to register complaints about specific individuals or about items that should be addressed confidentially through the proper channels. All comments shall be addressed to the district clerk and shall be limited to not more than 5 minutes per board policy 2180. Please note that members of the board may not be able to directly respond to citizens' concern during the public open forum. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Do we have any emails?
We do not.
Okay. Then I'm going to move to presentations. We have 2 presentations. The first one is the proposed capital project, and SEI Design Group is going to be presenting. We have 2 individuals that come on up. Thank you.
So yes, we got Matt and Joanne from SEI here. We'll be up to talk about the latest, greatest plans of the proposed capital project. There has been some movement, as you know, in regards to funding, in regards to what the scope of the work will be doing. We met last week to discuss more of some of the things that we need to take a look at, and then we meet tomorrow as a group with Peter to talk more about our plan for the construction. So I will exit my seat and let Matt and Joanne take over.
Should I stay right here?
Yeah,
I think
Yeah.
so.
because of the
Drive.
computer situation.
All right, well,
It's being temperamental, so.
all right.
This works out better for camera, to see his face and it's faster.
Well, this is not it.
So this is the.
Yeah, but I did the wrong one. All right, so thank you for having us. Most of what I'm going to go through this evening, we did present, I think it was probably a few months ago now. So this largely is a review for the board tonight. We presented, obviously on a more quote-unquote local level, and then came to the board with what we had prioritized. Everything started with kind of the building condition survey process, and we've boiled everything down into a prioritized proposed project. So that's what we'll go through tonight. And like I said, a lot of it should be much of a review. So to review, we're going to go through excuse me, the scope of work that's proposed right now. I want to sort of just give the disclaimer that this is the scope. I mean, it's in the presentation, but we're here for you guys to be able to comment and for there to be feedback and to make adjustment. And we'll go through the schedule that allows for that at the end of this. But we'll look at the scope, we'll look at the budget and financial impact. And then, like I said, some pre-referendum schedule and then proposed project schedule as we move forward. So we're going to jump right in here with the middle high school. So this is, like I said, exactly as you've seen it in the past, and we have a more detailed spreadsheet that many of you have had a copy of. But one of the bigger items we're doing here is to put an addition on the building to create a dedicated middle school and a dedicated high school art room. Right now they're sort of in one space that really could be kind of the space that that one single art room should take up. So essentially they're two small art rooms right now. We want to add a little bit to the building, and we want to re-equalize the art room so they'll be both essentially be equal but larger collectively. So that's why we have expansion and renovation. So both middle school and high school will be new. Part of what we presume will be the high school art room will be within new additional space. In both buildings we have roof restoration. The district has done a very good job in the past keeping up with roofs. Right now the approach is to apply fluid applied coating to existing roofs that are in very good condition right now but just need more life to them. So that's a trend that we're going to continue. That's already been happening here in the school district. There's a small ventilation project in the metal shop. Asbestos abatement is just going to happen with any project, so we always list that when we're in old buildings. Exterior masonry restoration, another thing, I'd equate it to the roofs. Every project you probably have a little bit of masonry restoration, just as you're keeping up older brick buildings. A little bit of money is always devoted to masonry restoration to protect your investment. So you'll see an alternate scope listed in both of the elementary school and middle high school scopes of work. Alternate scope is additional scope that we'd really like to have in the project, but right now it's been prioritized to the fringe of the project. We like to, a lot of times when it's so early in the process, like right now, it's before a referendum, it hasn't been put to voters yet, no design has been accounted for at this point, and we learn a lot from design, and a lot of times things cost less once you know a little bit more about the project. Of course, if you're a skeptic, you're going to say things are costing a lot more these days, and that may be the case, but regardless, to protect the district from, we like to protect the district from being over budget or under budget when we're trying to plan a capital project. So we'll oftentimes add alternate scope that are part of the wish list items list that we will design, and if money provides, those items will be included in the project. So in this case, some additional that is over the middle school wing, that is where the next roofing project would be. So just being able to show the public that graphically how much of a school we're impacting with a project, this is a quick way to translate that.
A couple questions before we move on.
Yeah.
Over here. Thanks.
It's coming from everywhere.
First, appreciate the comment of showing the public graphically, but to that, could we get the presentation added to board docs? Thank you. I appreciate having there for future reference also. So I don't remember the art expansion. I'm sorry, the art addition. How much space is that?
That was
800 to 900 square feet.
yeah.
Approximately 900 square feet.
Yeah, 800 to 900.
Okay.
SED will aid 1,200 square feet per art classroom in the middle school, high school level. So to equalize the classrooms at the correct size, 800 to 900 square feet is how much we would have to add to get each of those classrooms to be the 1,200 square feet that is recommended by SED for each of those classrooms.
Okay, great. And for the roof replacement, just what's the condition of the current roof?
I believe, if memory serves correctly, it's like a 20-year-old EPDM roof, which is a single ply rubber membrane. Those are the roofs that, in that 20 to 25 year age are great candidates for fluid applied restoration. So you're essentially taking the, your thin piece of rubber that's, maybe 1/8 of an inch thick, and you're adding almost that much more in multi-ply sort of fluid applied coating. So it ends up being a double thick roof at the end of the day. And oftentimes with roofs, they speak in the language of warranties, and these systems are getting 20-year warranties to basically double the life of your roof.
Great. And for the rest of the building, what's the age of the roof on that? Do you know?
Rich may be able to answer better, but I believe a number of the areas have already received this fluid applied coating, and I would, without having my report notes in front of me, I'd say all of them would be under 20 years at the time of the project, so younger than this particular roof.
Most of the roofs that have been put on in the last 8 years. So the high school roof is brand new. That's got like 7 years on it. The rest of it was fluid applied, and we have a 20-year warranty on that. So the middle school roof and half of the gym roof are the two that we don't have. They're out of warranty right now. So if anything happens to them, it's on us. So that's why we do that. And there's a couple roofs down to Ellis that didn't get done in the last project that need to be done now. So they're all out of warranty right now. So
Okay. Thank you.
Except for what's almost brand new.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's pretty minimal district-wide what area of roofs still need attention, so you're in pretty good shape, certainly after this type of work. Next is just some photos, selected photos of the middle high school in the area. As you can see, sort of the patched in roof in the upper left, some asbestos flooring in a band room in the lower left, and then the upper right is actually the back of that art room area, which we'd be expanding. Right now we're saying that the path of least resistance is to expand out towards your fields, but at this point it could go in literally any direction. It's going to be based on what works best when we get to the design phase of the project, where an addition goes, what it looks like, all those types of things to make the program inside work best. If there are no questions, I'll move on to the elementary school. So again, this scope list, very much like what you've seen in the past from our last presentation. The difference here is the obvious, we've crossed out the pre-K classroom addition and written next to it no state aid. So what we've learned in sort of some of our discovery as we moved from our April meeting to now working through how do we get these things, because even though we're not in design, we want to be informed on a number of things to better prepare us to move forward. So in this case, we had conversations with New York State Education Department and obviously did conversations with district administration, and through doing a utilization study, which we performed as sort of kind of part of the building condition survey, where we identify what's in each space and how it's being used throughout a building. What we got from that was information on, which is relatively obvious to you folks, that you keep your elementary school class sizes nice and small, essentially, which I understand is an intentional thing based on past grants and moves by the administration and board for your quality of education. So what we ran into while considering in addition to your school is we looked at the numbers the way that New York State Education would look at your numbers, and they would look at the number of students you have and the number of classrooms you have and say that you don't need any more classrooms. And when they say that, based on the math, it means you can't get money from the state to add a new classroom. So if you wanted any classroom, pre-K through 5 in this building, it would be 100% on the school district and the taxpayers, rather than aided at your state aid ratio. So based on those findings, we did some brainstorming and tried to reevaluate and figure out different, perhaps creative ways that we could still increase the amount of learning space you have in the building. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but I just wanted to at least quickly explain why the pre-K classroom addition is currently not on the list. And I think in general, the discussion of whether you have 2 on-site UPK classrooms or 1 is one that sort of lives beyond this capital project discussion, essentially. Yes.
Do you happen to know what the class size would have to increase to in order for it to be aided?
You looked at those numbers. I think they want you to put 24 students in an elementary school classroom. So once you, and it's based on grade level, and you take your enrollment per grade level and divide it by their number, which is 24. And some years you would need, or some grade levels you would need maybe 1 less classroom than you actually have today. And as soon as they see that happening once, they'll say, well, there are other ways, and they essentially implement their state standards, so you're being treated the same way every other district is being treated. So just to quickly review the rest of the scope on this list, and the next slide again will be the graphic representation, which will help a little bit, but we're looking at really focusing in on the elementary school in this capital project. It hasn't had nearly the same amount of attention as the middle high school, so this is its shot to really make some advancements. So we're looking at a lot of classroom renovations and modernizing. The boilers are a big chunk, and they're ready to be replaced. The roof restoration, as we talked about, is a relatively minor area, but there is a little bit left to be taken care of. And then ventilation, plumbing, electrical, those are just the standard infrastructure things that are hard to see, but they're constantly aging and need attention. Again, like I stated for the other school, masonry restoration is just a reoccurring thing that we devote at least a small chunk of money in each project. And then again, with alternate scope, these are sort of those sideline wish list items that we'd really like to take care of. I think I would encourage to push them all the way through design and get prices for everything at once, and then we can decide really what can be part of the project. So in that case, since the budget goals didn't quite align with touching the entire elementary school, we have some classrooms with a lesser need that we would put into this alternate scope category, and perhaps fix the critical items like cabinetry and doors and things that really get a lot of wear in an elementary school classroom. And then there's a couple of things that that you haven't seen before. The two last things on the list are a couple of things that have been bouncing around as simple, isolated moves that can sort of improve the overall effectiveness of the school. And one of them can add a gender-neutral restroom, and another is to consolidate the copy center with where you store paper currently. So this is
Got a question here.
Yes.
The exterior masonry work, I believe it was 2 projects ago, and Rich may know this better than I, it seemed to me there was quite a bit of masonry work done there to replace a lot of the grout or cement or whatever is the right term to use for the exterior.
That's been 10, 12 years. That was before I got here. They redid the whole upstairs on the courtyard side.
Yeah.
They did a lot of stuff, but that's a while ago now.
So is that part of this?
No, that wouldn't be part of it. That's still in pretty good shape.
Okay.
It's just a few other things upstairs, which you can't see on the roof. There's a lot of limestone that's missing or coming apart. Some brick coming apart up on the upper roof, just on the back side of the.
Upset.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's frankly a lot of.
I just wondered if we got a good deal, if we got our money's worth out of the last one you said.
You know what,
You know.
your buildings look great as far as masonry goes. You're in very good shape. So really what we're looking at for masonry reconstruction in most of the campus is the things that you may never see. But you still need to take care of. It's the stuff that is above a roof on the second floor that is tucked away somewhere, but it can't just be left to
Okay.
crumble, essentially. So as you can tell.
Matt, I have a
Oh,
question.
yes.
If you could go back one slide.
Sure.
I just wanted to, instead of approaching all of them, just tell me your process of, when you mean upgrading the plumbing, ventilation, and electrical, are you gonna touch everything, or is there a priority list of what needs to be? Or are you going to, when you're in an area, you're gonna upgrade it?
So 90% of the project that you see here presented tonight are things that came up on the building condition survey, where myself and our team of architects and engineers sort of scour all the buildings. They talk to the staff and people that have been here a long time, and those things come up. The things that haven't been touched for a while, or the mechanical unit that you stop being able to get parts for, and things become defunct, and anything with mechanical parts and pieces that wears. It's usually the oldest of all those things becomes prioritized and put on the list. In the case of this building, if we're touching a classroom, we're touching the mechanicals, the lighting, and we're adding a sink and upgrading any plumbing that are there. So if you see that we're touching a classroom, those things are on the table. But there's also the mechanical items that are sort of isolated, and we have them itemized on our BCS, and to some extent we have them itemized still on our the scope document that is the technical part of what we're presenting tonight. But it ends up being, you have 2 air handlers that are just at the end of their useful life, and those are the ones we need to replace now. It's rarely sort of a blanket, let's get all this wing new.
Oh, I know that, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a cap for each item?
Yeah, it's a balancing act overall through hundreds of items. As you know, we created a list, between the building condition survey and programmatic and improvement needs that, could have been a project that was $30 million plus, but that usually when your needs or when your wish list is 30 million, that doesn't mean that you're doing a $30 million job. You're taking, you're doing the hard work and you're buckling down and you're prioritizing things, and that's when the balancing act hones in on, we really need to do this one, because if we do another capital project in 5 or 6 years, it's too late for this item. So that's usually, sometimes unfortunately what it boils down to is my boilers in this building won't make it to the next capital project, and if I don't do it now by choice, I'm going to have to do it,
In the middle of winter, 3 years.
in the middle of the winter as an emergency, and it's just coming out of some sort of yearly budget so you can provide heat in open school.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, back to the map of the building. This one does a lot for me because, unlike the middle high school, we're touching a lot of this building. We're touching a lot of learning spaces, and when you've got constant maintenance and upkeep on the building shell with the roofs and the masonry and the building mechanical to keep the buildings heated, nobody sees that. So when we're able to do the level of renovations to a large portion of a school, it's a great opportunity to really have an impact on learning spaces. So that was really the original focus, even though, as we go down a straight line, going through developing a project, creating a building condition survey where we're auditing everything, all those needs sort of creep into the list of wants, and again, you're back to that balancing act, but maintaining that this piece is an important piece to really touch the education space is a big deal in this case, and it's that just decision making is reflected in what we have here. So, and you can see, well, of course it's like a purple over a blue, but the center sections over the auditorium in front of the building where there are flat roofs, that's the area that still needs to be done. A few pictures here. You'll see some of the masonry that's sort of way up high or above a roof that's showing its age and definitely needs some attention. Obviously, boilers need to be replaced every 20 or 30 years, and our time is up here. You can see that on the lower right, and upper left is a standard classroom, which, frankly, from the maintenance that's been done over the years, your systems, your lights, and your mechanicals and items wear out, but it's been maintained in good working order for quite some time. You just have the layers of aged blackboards that aren't being used anymore, that are just still there in the background. This is where we sort of changed, since we've covered the scope that basically we covered before, and we talked about the pre-K being at this point sort of crossed off as something that's state aidable. So I'm going to continue on the elementary school and switch gears a little bit to some of the other discoveries that we've made along the way, that we believe could, in place of adding a classroom, which we wouldn't get aid on, I think we can juggle some things around within the building and create more educational space. And I'll just try and lead you down this road, and hopefully you follow me.
One more question, Matt. The number of classrooms you're gonna rehab in Scott Ellis, is that gonna be the majority of them will be finished by then, Jen, or the front of the building will be done?
The front wing,
Okay.
Yes.
upstairs and
Up
downstairs.
Very good.
Rough numbers, we're, our goal is to touch 22, and I think we have around 12 left that would not have been touched based on these numbers. But of course, you know, we do our best, and you know, while being as conservative as we need to be with sort of volatile, you know, construction environment, we use numbers to project what it would cost, and we have the advantage of knowing what 2 classrooms cost us a year ago. So we can try to extrapolate, and being conservative, we use those same numbers to push 2 to 22, and that's the money that's been set aside. We would hope that 2 versus 22, you get 22 more efficiently than you get 2 standalone classrooms crammed into a summer. So we're hopeful that money goes further than we're projecting, but there's always somewhere, there's always the next place to spend the money. So I don't worry so much about assigning too big a number to something this early, because you know, we'll get our money's worth in the end. So I will continue, and we're going to take a specific look into a particular area of the building, and some of you may be familiar. This is the elementary school, and I suppose as you're looking at the building, it's the front left corner is about where you are. So you can see in this, there's just enough context to spot the main entrance, main office, and the auditorium. So if you recall, there was an addition in the past to create an elevator tower to create accessibility in the building. And as a result of those moves forward, it stalled out a little bit on creating the complete exit path for the building. And you know, I can't speak as somebody that's used the building, but I know we've heard a lot about you know, folks needing to sneak through classrooms to get to you know, to the most convenient path from A to B is either through this classroom or a way around a loop. And from a safety and exiting standpoint, we really want to eliminate any of these things that we can. So this is sort of just a little part of the whole, but it's something along the way we identified as something. So you can see I've put an arrow through on the left the art classroom on the first floor, and an arrow through the band music classroom on the second floor. Essentially, this should be a connector corridor, so you can continue the loop. I know in speaking to district staff, there's certain things you can't do with that classroom right now because you can't lock the door or secure it because you need to maintain exiting or egress at certain times. So this is sort of our food for thought portion where we're thinking we can make some moves and create the need for SED, the State Education Department, to grant Greenville aid on this building, because if we can prove that classrooms are undersized and we're making them appropriate sized, or there's a safety issue that we have to fix, and when we fix it, we reduce the size of a classroom, all of a sudden they start changing their tune and say, oh, I see now, yes, you do, you have lost learning space because you're making it safer. That means our path to getting additional education space becomes a little bit cleaner. So I've listed obviously those two connector corridors here, and in the next slide I'm going to expand on the two of those, because obviously when you run a corridor through a moderately sized art room, you don't have a moderately sized art room anymore, so you sort of have to chase all these things out, and along the path you eventually or hopefully you get to a point that you're improving situations. So this is a lot of bullet points, but that first bullet point of creating a corridor on the first floor to the access stair creates the need to create a new art room. So that art room can be in one of our previously identified renovated rooms, but one of them have to be larger to include a kiln room that's, you're able to isolate the kiln in its own ventilated room. Same thing with the band room. You run a corridor through that band room. Do you talk about reconfiguring in that space or creating a new space for the band room? And we end up trying to play this strategy so down the line, the State Education Department looks upon the project favorably because it's making it safer and it's creating more quality learning space for children. So a couple of other things, and this is sort of our specific layout right now based on a plan that, like we said, we're meeting specifically about the elementary school tomorrow to work out particulars of what will work and what won't work, because a lot of times we'll make assumptions and go back and forth essentially. So in this case, we would move the music suite, we'd consolidate so the choral and band is together in one area. In this case, the multipurpose room is a perfect candidate with higher ceilings and enough space for that. And what we've done here, which is sort of counterintuitive, but the creative way to get more educational space, is to look at your gym stations. You can actually add a new gym station to your building and be more likely to get state aid than adding a classroom based on your specific situation. So in this case, if right-sizing all your educational space and creating safe exit corridors push your classroom program into that current multi-purpose space, then that current multi-purpose space can be reimagined as a new gym unit as an addition, and you get state aid on the entire thing. So a couple of other things that are unrelated to sort of that shift of all the rooms are the need really on the ground floor to increase the size of the pre-K classroom. So again, we're increasing the size of a small classroom to make it right-sized, create the right environment, add a restroom in the classroom, and that that builds our case that we were undersized and our class sizes were small. Now we're going to right size, and obviously that takes up more space within your current walls. Eventually something has to give. There's also an opportunity to create a larger size 5th grade classroom where one is undersized. So again, if there's a 5th grade classroom and it's next to a resource room or an office. You might know better than me, Joanne, but on the second floor, there's a way to displace a resource room and create a classroom that's the appropriate size. So we want to look at all those opportunities, make sure we're affecting the building in a positive way and making things right. Certainly if we're going to spend the money on 22 classrooms, we don't want to renovate a 600 square foot classroom that we know is too small and spend, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars and then end up with the same small classroom at the end. So wherever there's an opportunity, now would be the time. And at the end of the day, essentially by displacing the multi-purpose gym, creating a new one, you create new learning space the size of a gymnasium that isn't actually in the existing walls of your building, and you fill it with resource rooms and additional learning space. So,
Do you have a visual of where the gym, like how you're going to expand it? Because I can't visualize where it's going to be.
yeah, unfortunately, I'd love to have it side by side, but in this slide, in the orange, off the back of the existing multi-purpose space is the current conception of where it could be. So in this slide, you'll see all the same light blue spaces that we were touching in the first iteration of this plan, but now in a darker tone of blue, you see some of those changes that are safety and programmatic enhancements to the building rather than just cosmetic renovations are happening. So on the second floor at the top of the screen, you have the music room with a corridor cut in. Below that, you have the art room with a corridor cut in. So the art room, if you look at the first floor plan in the bottom right, you can see the renovation for the art room. That's our placeholder for this, and it takes one of those light blue rooms and it takes the room next to it to create an appropriately sized classroom for the art. And it can be sort of, we're trying to gloss over the minutia of this person's in an office here and now he's got to move to here, and this person's in an office here and now she's in an office here. But after you do that shuffle, you essentially create a compelling argument for New York State that you need to use the existing multipurpose room for a music suite because we don't have appropriate size in the rest of the building. And then all of a sudden, the gym station that was the multipurpose suite can be thought of as an aidable addition. So that's what we're looking at here. So you're not only still touching all those existing classrooms, which largely will be the same, but you've got new music suite, new art suite, and you've got an opportunity at a new multi-purpose gym space on top of it.
How would students access it? Because right now in looking at it, I don't see a way for them to get it other than going outside.
So what I did not include in this presentation were the particular plans. So there's a much more complicated set of plans that we created as the utilization for the building, and those are the plans we'll be going through with Mr. Mahart tomorrow. And that essentially, with the existing multi-purpose gym area and its support spaces, would essentially be gutted, and we'd run a corridor through that space to access that addition where it is. So you'd be able to access it through the inside of the building, and you'd have multiple opportunities to access it from outside the building, which may be an advantage to the program as well.
And so just understand, if I'm, visually challenged or spatially challenged, then I'm not losing the parking. It's going as if we're coming to the high school. Okay.
Yes. So It's not without its challenges, because you're relatively landlocked, but there is some room to play with back there, where you could get in the access drive that essentially crosses behind the building around this addition, as long as we don't want to encourage you to build a monstrous gym on the backside of this school, and you will run out of space. So there, again, would be a balancing act to make sure access to the pavilion and the parking behind the building and fire truck access is all taken care of.
And so we can do this within the capital project amount so that there is no impact on taxpayers.
That is the goal. So
Okay.
there was obviously a cost value associated with the pre-K addition. That's obviously one for one been swapped with this addition. So this addition is slightly larger in square footage than 2 pre-K classrooms would be, but having aid eligibility is a big deal to maintain a tax neutral, no tax impact of this project. So that's never going to change. It's going to continue to be tax neutral, and it's a good point to mention, since we're so early in the plan, and we want to set our goals and our priorities at this level, but we can't lock in really firmly to an exacting sort of where every dollar is going to be spent, because based on what SED tells us, favorably or not, we're going to need to maintain flexibility as a team and district to make sure the overarching priorities that we set can still be implemented in a project, even if it shifts direction a little bit. So, and we've already had a lot of conversations about those types of things. There's some obvious nice things that have come up as the project's developed, that now it's like, why wasn't this the priority the first day? But we're glad that we've ironed out some of these things. But again, we want to build a project that we're confident that the set dollar amount is going to achieve our goals, and when it comes time to pay for those items, we'll be able to manage that reasonably. And that sometimes means spending less money here and more money here and juggling a little bit. But that's essentially how all capital projects have to go. Because, like I mentioned before, the project doesn't get designed before the public decides on it. They get designed after. So, and you learn a lot of things along the process that can influence and create opportunities to be flexible.
So just then to understand kind of the sequence, it's going to go before the voters, and then once they approve it, then we will finalize it? It doesn't seem, I'm confused.
So what we want to do is conceive of a feasible project scope and budget that, for every reason we can conceive of, should be executable on, with that scope and that budget. Obviously, that doesn't take away the fact that things are flexible, but flexibility doesn't mean we're going to abandon what the public voted on and start again. It means if the price of this goes up, then we have to be more efficient with that to move forward.
I don't think we have to go before the voters again.
Yes, don't we?
For this,
December 6th, we have to have a vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
Yeah.
but that's where,
this is the December one that we're talking
Yeah,
about.
right.
So, but if I'm a voter, I'm gonna wanna know, what are you spending the money on? So it has to be finalized with enough in kind of alternates, just depending on how actual costs come in. I mean, that's always the way that we do it.
Yeah, I don't foresee a scenario where a project changes gears so much to the point that you're executing a project that's different than you advertise to the public.
Right.
That's not a good place to be.
Yeah, and nothing that you said at this point would suggest that.
Great. I don't want to give that impression.
Duncan, can you just use your microphone because they can't hear us on the
Yeah.
recording? Thanks.
So, well, I'm sorry, Duncan, you have a question?
No.
Okay. At what point in the process do you ask SCD for the termination of its, if it's aidable, and how long do they take to answer?
So ideally, we would start that dialogue immediately after like this meeting.
Tomorrow.
If the decision is to move forward, and there's multiple parts of this that we've already started, that we're doing the groundwork for what they call a preliminary submission. So there are certain guidelines for preliminary submissions, which is a submission before you do the design and final, that it's your means to ask permission to do certain things, so they upfront agree that they're going to aid things. So at this point, we would use the utilization plans and the enrollment data and plans like you're seeing here to create a case. And we with the district together would write what they call a facility needs assessment, and that's a narrative that is your compelling reason why you need to add square footage for learning space or anything in a building, and that gets submitted to them before, voters don't need to approve a referendum for you to start that process and get that process into them. Review times are difficult to answer, but we would hope in a case like this that it's more of an active dialogue than a submission that sits in a queue for 6 months. So that's also not to say, I think when we plan a referendum, we try to plan for sort of the worst case scenario, and we ask for as much as we can ask for from SED. I can assure you, there are ways to execute sort of the advantage parts of this program you see without having everything fall in our favor, and that's sometimes a nice option to have, is there can be compromises and we can still execute our goals if this is the plan.
And I couldn't, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I have a different question, so if you have a follow-up, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure. The point Tracy made about the public and what they're looking at. The public is looking at the plans that we submit to SED and that we hope is doable when the bids come back. What doesn't have to go back afterwards, if we make changes in that, or for example, the alternates don't make it, okay? And like you said, you have built into your overall look, you have ways to deal with something if they don't approve that. That doesn't have to go back out to the voters. Those changes would be made, and that's what's presented to the voters.
Yeah, I mean, we want to present the intent and the scope of the
As
project
accurate as you can.
as accurate as you can. And what's very transparent is there's a set of scope, and those are the goals.
Right.
cannot deviate from those goals,
Right.
but there can be lots more goals than maybe money can afford.
Right.
And then there's the budget, and you can't, and it's an agreed upon number, and you can't spend a penny more.
Right.
You can always spend less, and you can always do less, but the goal is to deliver, to be as transparent and forthright as possible, and deliver honestly as much, and letting your dollar go as far as it possibly can to execute the plan once you've gotten buy-in from the public that they agree with that plan too.
One more question. You mentioned 2 corridor connections to exit stairs. I lost track as to whether they're in the alternate scope of work or if they've been moved into the scope of work given the removal of the pre-K class.
That's a good question, but at this point, the way it's being presented tonight is that their base scope, because they've risen to the top as something that really is a good idea to execute and has been sort of causing problems along the way for the school.
Makes sense, but just so I understand, I heard you say that there's a potential safety issue. Just from the perspective of the school safety plan, how important is that part of the project?
Well, I hate to say that there's a gray area with any safety, but what you have, as far as I can decipher, you have a plan that went to New York State and got a permit to be built at the time. So at the time, they allowed this to happen, and I believe they received assurances from the district that these rooms had sort of limited types of uses and limited sort of securability as the terms of them accepting this. I could be off base or speculating because I wasn't around for that, but I believe that's close to what the case was, that it was approved, it was a conditional case where they must have had to do it that way, but looking at it with fresh eyes, it's really something that is an easy fix that should be taken care of.
Okay, I mean, more to the point, maybe it's a question for Mike or Tracy or Duncan or administrator. Has Needham ever flagged it as something to be addressed? I'm not concerned about it makes sense. I'm just trying to understand the extent to which it might be like a real safety issue that you should put it into the base scope, even if some other things, would shake out where you'd be looking to maybe bump it out.
I think it sounds like there's an absolute need for it, and just the situation, just the environment has changed since we put the elevator in. I mean, I remember 2006-ish, so we're looking at over a decade, and if we just think about the school environment and safety requirements and everything else, they've changed significantly. So what may have started out as a conditional situation now, given the environment, the current environment, I think has risen to it. So I'm supporting the plan for it. Mike?
Yeah, Needham understands that we can't lock those doors because of fire egresses, those types of things that Matt was talking about. The issue that has come up now is that internally there are some issues around how do we secure and lock those areas. And that's something that Peter's been dealing with teachers in that area and understanding the safety concerns now over the past, since the state legislation in 2000. So I think those are the types of things that we have to start to deal with. And as Needham, we put it, the fire in the way it was designed. We can't lock those doors because of a safety issue, but at the same time, it's preventing or it's causing a safety issue. So this is an opportunity to address both of those things so that we don't have to deal with that, to make sure that our faculty, staff, and our kids stay safe.
Right.
Fire and any other
it all makes sense, just, if I understand, it was in the alternate scope of work, it's now in the base scope. And just, given the discussion, it sounds like something that should stay in the base scope, even though the base scope is still subject to change and other things might come out. I'm just saying that for the safety reasons, it sounds like this is something that, should be kept in there, based on what I've heard.
Yes, yeah, after hearing the comments, it's clear that you're not getting the functionality you want out of it, and it's a clear safety improvement to execute a change. So I think we're on the right track with adding this scope to the project.
And key dates, what are the key dates moving forward?
All right, couple more slides to bore you with, but this is an updated, I'm 2 slides away from your question, sorry. So this is an updated cost breakdown from the prior time that we presented this scope. With some of the changes, what's happened is we've tightened up some numbers now that we're a little bit closer to refining a scope. We're tightening some of our contingencies, and if you look back to the previous document, you'll see the elementary school number went up, so we're spending a little bit more in the elementary school. We're doing the same exact amount of scope in the high school, middle school, but those numbers have tightened up a little bit to eliminate some of the contingencies over the top. So between those two is around 13.5 million. I've got a typo in this number, which you'll see a different one in the next page, but 13,665,000 is the actual number if you add up those top 2 numbers. And the alternate scope 1.4 is again those other items that I would often encourage to keep some or all in the project just so they're there. We always go through projects and we're conservative in the beginning. Going into a construction season, we hold contingencies. Oftentimes those contingencies can be $500,000 to $1 million, and you could spend a fraction of it in construction uncovering unknown items. You want to have it there in case you find something bad. You don't want your project to go upside down, but oftentimes you don't spend it. And those alternate items sitting there that have already been designed and already been bid are a great opportunity to pull things back into the project, to close the project out, and spend the rest of the money that has been approved to be spent. So the project cost highlights are, again, a reiteration of what we presented in the past, but I like to break these down, things down into categories through the entire district-wide project, so you can see sort of the scale of where money's being spent. So, additions, elementary classroom renovations. So the elementary classroom renovations is a significant piece of this project, and I think it's been the driving force from the beginning, and I think we haven't lost that focus, which is important to highlight. This is a look. I don't expect you to read it, but you can if you want. This is the scope, line by line. So what I have in the presentation previously is sort of a simplification with categories. This is the line by line document. That is how we organize the project, and it shows, what we believe today's cost is. It shows what it's going to cost in 2.5 years when we actually have a contractor on site, and it has built-in general conditions and contingencies and incidental budgets, which are just all parts of the whole. Some part of what a contractor will charge you, and some just the soft cost to deliver a project and manage it. Again, this is a review, so I'll go through this quickly, but between 70% state building aid, which I assume is still about that. I know it does fluctuate. The project scope that we've presented, we believe to be 95 to 100% aid eligible. There's always going to be this or that might not qualify for aid. So when the district's financial advisor builds a project and a borrowing schedule, they always build it in with a little bit of flexibility. So that's assumed 95% state aid eligibility. That way, if something does come up, you're not messing up the numbers with the zero tax impact. So the rest of this essentially is what creates a tax neutral project that has that 13,665,000 number, which is not my number. It comes from your third-party financial advisor. This is the schedule if you were to proceed with a December 6th vote. So April, we talked about the project. Today we're talking about, whether still not everything needs to be completely defined tonight, but I think it's pretty darn close to something that represents a reasonable scope and budget. But that doesn't mean that nobody can have input and it can't be changed. It's still, we're still open for the alterations in what we presented tonight. But to stay on this schedule, obviously, we've got some logistics things to do with state environmental quality review, and we've got a couple of deadlines which I've penciled in the actual October dates, where October 3rd is essentially the date we would target that everybody is in agreement with the scope and the budget that's presented, and that's what we're going to execute in a potential project. And then as we move forward beyond that, you give legal notice, and it's like any other public vote for your budget or referendum, that there's notice, there's public forums where we can come talk to the public, do whatever you like, and advertise to make sure everybody has the same information, and we go from there. So if you...
One just quick question, does that allow for SED to get back to us? Just the way that, for example, we found about the pre-K, since you talked about having a preliminary submission into SED, will they turn it around that quickly? It seems 60 days. I don't know what their backlog is in the past. It's been significant,
Yes, it's altogether possible, but when we proceed in this direction, we're not putting all our eggs in that basket. We're going with some assurances and logic that we can make an argument that still executes our goal with SED. I would be surprised by an outright refusal. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here tonight talking about this kind of plan. Much better if they do answer us and we have those assurances, but I think given our logic and our strategy, we've got a way to still execute this project and make it work, even if it drags beyond that date.
Let me ask the question another way. That schedule you just had back up on the previous slide.
Mm-hmm.
If we have nothing back from SED and approval, we still go forward with that schedule at that point, anticipating approval. Is that correct? Or do we have to have SED signed on a dotted line before we do the vote?
No, yes. You would proceed with this schedule regardless of SED's responsiveness.
Right.
And that's
They come back
essentially the strategy that I would recommend.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, those types of things are worked out, and it is sometimes a negotiation with SED, and you know, they have folks on their side of the table that their job description is finding the most aid for the school districts they serve, as you know, in terms of building projects. So we're confident that we could make a deal with them to create enough building aid to be able to deliver this as promised. It could be in 9 months, and it would still be okay. I mean, a lot of times it's well after a referendum vote. If things fall into place that you can take advantage of getting an earlier look from SED, then you absolutely do it, and we're going to try for that. But it's not a deal
It's
breaker
not
to not
prerequisite.
have the response.
It's not on the timeline.
Correct. It's from our standpoint, it's a convenience to be able to have those answers early, but they don't often come early.
And then my last question, so this would be actual construction next summer, so summer of '23? Is that the goal?
Nope, next slide is actually, so a good rule of thumb is to be bidding approximately 1 year after your referendum vote. In a project this size, between how long it takes SED to review a final submission package, which is all the designs are done, and do the designs, do the discovery, verifications, and in-depth coordinated design. A good rule of thumb on a project like this would be a year from a December vote, you should be expecting to bid the project. So the timeline is pretty good for a December vote, because you end up being able to bid a project in either the end of the year or the beginning of the year, allowing contractors to procure materials and plan for the project execution before the first summer hits. So that first summer is projected to be the summer of 2024, which is essentially the bad news I have to give every school district, that you're you know, there's a lot of anticipation and there's a lot that goes into building these projects, and then you don't see anything happen for, you know, a year plus before actually a shovel's in the ground.
So perfect questions. I like what I heard. Sounds like a great project. I just want some simple, they could be yes or no answers to my questions, which are going to be simple. What I heard is it's still staying, the project as a whole is still staying as a tax neutral project.
Yes.
I also heard the project size has not changed in scope. It's still the same size, plus or minus 80 bid.
Yes, so when we presented in April, we presented that same 13,665 number as the tax neutral goal for budget. That remains the same today. The scope that is underneath that number, making up that number, has changed in the obvious ways that I presented tonight.
Right. But the big number is the same number.
Absolutely.
And when we found out that state ed would not give us more classroom space, instead of looking in the window, we were looking out the window. We've changed perspective a little bit, but we're fixing a safety issue that was there, that was acceptable at one time, and now we're fixing that safety issue, and we're just rearranging our space so it's more usable and correct size.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a question also, and I will apologize in advance. I asked this last time, I don't remember the answer. But I'd asked you before about energy efficiency equipment. and applying for incentives, because there are various incentives through utilities, NYSERDA, probably federal, New York Power Authority might have opportunities to help. So the question is, at what point are you planning, or perhaps I should ask, are you planning to, as part of the design, look at options for the equipment for energy efficient? Like what's the increment, looking at the incremental cost to do the more efficient product and the payback to determine if it would be cost effective?
So, yes, during the design, we explore all of those, and we did go back, and I don't know if we shared with Rich or discussed with Rich some of those avenues, because there are a lot, and there are opportunities out there that we would absolutely try and obtain. The scope that we put together and the costs is often takes into consideration that we're primarily K through 12 school architects, and it would be a disservice to ourselves and others to put junk or energy, non-energy efficient items in these buildings that, they get a lot of use, they could take a lot of abuse. Provisions for investing in, the correct mechanical equipment that's going to serve you better, but may have a higher upfront cost, is built into the project, and part of what we would work through in the design to make sure it's not just me making decisions on which unit it is. It's a collective philosophy on, do we like life cycle costs or low upfront costs when we invest in things. And there's a whole nother 2 hours of talk that we could do tonight to go through what makes more sense from what gets specified for the building. But to try to answer your question more efficiently, absolutely part of the equation at this point, until we're told otherwise by this table.
My personal opinion is, I'd like to see energy efficient equipment installed to the extent that it's feasible.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, somebody who's 7 or 10 year payback for something that might have a 20-year or longer useful life, it makes sense. You understand we're working within the tax neutral number. Just at some point, and I don't know how long down the road that would be, I'd like to have some understanding of what that consideration is. I mean, what was looked at. I mean, it could be at a high level. I'm not asking for something line by line or piece by piece, but of what the consideration is and where it makes sense to install something that is more energy efficient and where we decide that it's not. Just to understand how that was factored into the project and what the ultimate decision was. So, I appreciate getting that information. Again, like I realize I don't know how many months or longer it is before you're at that stage. But that is an ask. And then one question is, to the extent there's an incremental cost, does the state, with respect to state aid, do they do any extra aid to try to help promote schools, like incentivize schools to do something more energy efficient? Or has it not filtered down to that?
I'm not aware of anything to that level. I mean, if I had to speculate, I'd say that the government has its other pathways. I think state education stays out of that lane and lets the other government grant systems promote the energy efficiency and things like that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, so basically, from what I'm hearing, we're pretty much all in agreement with the change of some of the elements in it and so forth. So keep going. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
The one thing, if you could give Daphne Pearson a copy of the presentation so we can upload it into board docs, that would be helpful.
Yes, I can leave this one.
Okay, thank you. We're not quite sure if one of you will have to be up here because the computer's a little temperamental.
I think Matt's coming up.
Okay,
The other night.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to switch presentations and talk about the district goals and the district comprehensive instruction plan. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike and everyone with the team, so thank you.
Yes, so as Daphne just displayed, that is the handout that you've got. So Matt is going to walk us through the district plans right now. I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mike. Good evening, folks. We're happy to be here tonight to present our district's comprehensive improvement plan for the 22-23 school year. This is a look that you are all familiar with by now. This is our Board of Ed adopted calendar for school improvement. And we have arrived at the point where we want to present our district goals and our district comprehensive improvement plan to the board. So quickly to review, how did we get here? So at the end of June, we presented our end of year report to the board. And shortly after that, admin, teachers, and parents worked together to use data from building profiles in order to set priorities and select strategies at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. So this work became each school's rough draft of their CEP. And from this work, administrators used each building's plans to select preliminary commitments and strategies to be implemented at the district level. These draft goals were shared at the July 11th board meeting. Which brings us to tonight. And we would like to highlight the commitments, strategies, resources, and measures of success that we will be working on in the coming school year in the interest of school improvement. So this plan reflects the culmination of a large body of work which has been completed this summer. You're going to hear us use the words goals and commitments tonight, and those can both be used interchangeably in this situation. You will recognize these goals as they've remained the same as last year, so you're familiar with them. The first goal is centered around curriculum, the second around culture, and the third focuses on community. Now, where the adjustments have been made are in the bulleted points underneath the goals. These are the district level strategies that we will pursue as part of each commitment or goal. So if we're looking underneath our curriculum goal, goal 1, we will be working to build staff capacity to use data to inform instructional decisions. And we're going to continue our work on supporting the systemic implementation of high leverage instructional practices across the district. For goal 2, our culture goal, it will be the implementation of best practices to create an environment where each student feels welcome, engaged, challenged, and supported in order to encourage student attendance. And finally, our community goal will be centered on communication and improving the alignment of communication processes across the district. As we review this year's plan, please look out for more focus and alignment across the district pre-K through 12. Well, as was discussed at an earlier presentation, by decreasing the number of improvement strategies, i.e. the things we're doing to try and get better, and aligning those across the district, we're actually freeing up more bandwidth for improvement work. So the shift from the 21-22 plan to the 22-23 plan can be seen here. And what's represented is that each school has 2 curriculum strategies, 1 culture strategy, and 1 community for a total of 4 at each site. Now at the district level, our improvement work follows that same model. However, in a change this year, our district plan was influenced by buildings rather than vice versa, as it had been in the past. So we looked at what each school had prioritized and planned with the intent that that district level work would be supporting those building level initiatives. So if I can turn over to our building principals to talk about some of those building level initiatives and what they look like in the DSIP.
So as you can see with goal 1 here, curriculum, from reviewing the data, the strategies you see on the slide were developed from a lot of work that went into it in July. I think it was July 6th and 7th with all stakeholders involved, from our faculty, our staff, administrators, parents, and the problem statement that came up that day really to focus on was students are not achieving sufficient rates of proficiency or mastery. So what was the root causes behind that? As we were digging into the data, the root causes that came up were that data is not consistently utilized to inform instruction, and the data is not always in user-friendly formats for analysis. So as Matt already, Ms. Berkshire already spoke about, we have 4 strategies overall. There are 2 within the curriculum goal. And the first one was the strategy of building staff capacity to utilize data to inform instructional decisions. So one of the big things, you've heard a little bit about this, this in May and June, was Intervention Compass. And a lot of professional learning will occur, development with the staff and faculty this fall, on the use of Intervention Compass, really to create data walls for, at the elementary level, ESGI, FEP, iReady, and iReady at the middle school, readings exams at the high school, course grades, attendance, RTI notes. All these things are going to flow into Intervention Compass. So where can a teacher go to find data this upcoming year? Well, that's going to be an Intervention Compass. And we're really pleased with this. There was a lot of research that went into looking at this product, but all data sets will be in one place. And the Intervention Compass really will allow for us to review the data as either a whole faculty in small groups, because a lot of our teams will break down data within their grade levels, but also just individually. And that's, a big focus that came up a little bit was how can people be, if they're looking at their class rosters, really get a quick overview. And, the Intervention Compass seems to be very user-friendly. I know Mr. Berkshire has used it quite a bit, but just looking at it, it's just quick and it seems very efficient, which one of the big things that came up was time to review all this data. And if it's all in one place now, it seems like it'll be a lot easier for us and should really allow us to build that staff capacity. One other quick thing here with the middle school, we were also looking at just some other progress monitoring tools to help us within our individual labs. We were kind of at the tier 2 level in small groups. And then also the high school is looking to really explore the use of utilizing iReady for reading and math at 9th grade level. Also trying to identify current grading practices within departments and at grade levels. And then one of the bigger things was, in this kind of continuation from the 21-22 DSIP, is to continue work with a team of teachers that have already started some of this work last year to review assessment programs. If you remember our last meeting, there was a lot of discussion at the high school level how there's not a lot of programs out there at the high school level. So they've got a couple projects. I think we actually have some presentations lined up here the next month or so from a group, from some of the work that started from last year. So as I said, goal 1 also has 2 strategies. So the other one was the systematic implementation of high-level instructional best practices. So the problem statement that kind of came up with this one, as we said, is the idea that students are not achieving sufficient rates of proficiency or mastery. And the root cause behind some of that is curriculum's not fully aligned, maybe either vertically or horizontally. From the middle school standpoint, we're looking at a continuation of finalizing standardized ELA standards for writing in our classrooms, in our curriculum maps, and updating those curriculum maps. And specifically with really focusing also in the building, I've come up with consistent practices for writing, for paragraph writing. And that was one thing as middle school BLT that we really focused on breaking it down, but overall also having our curriculum maps finalized with new writing processes across the grade levels, not only horizontally but vertically. Also, at the high school level, they're looking at, also just backing up a second, forgot about that. Because iReady only really focuses on reading, we're also looking at, as we're looking at this writing process of gathering some data on writing. So having a writing prompt at the beginning of the school year, and then again at the end, using a rubric that the building will decide upon what's happening there. So they're really looking at how can they foster collaborative culture through colleague visits. In September and November and October, they're looking at establishing norms for some of these colleague visits, and then develop a cycle for a lot of these visits to occur throughout this school year. And I think there'll be some ongoing support through faculty meetings for that. And I'm going to turn over at this point for Mr. Mahan to talk about Ellis.
So we follow the same structure as the middle school and high school regarding really trying to focus in on what strategies can we put in place to help accomplish the goals that are important to us as a district. And so when we looked at systematic implementation of instructional best practices, what we really wanted to go back to is one of our core learning areas, reading and in particular phonemic instruction. And so over the last few years, you've heard us talk more and more about how we emphasize phonics instruction in our classrooms. And so one of the strategies that we really want to use is making sure that we differentiate what different teachers need in different parts of our building in order to improve phonics instruction. So we've been using structured phonics units in grades K through 2 now, and we've implemented those over time in the last couple of years. And so at this point, what we really want to do is use the time that we have available when all of our teachers can be together at K through 2 to really talk about what is working well within those units. And if someone is having particular successes, we really want to expand and go deeper into those and find out why and what's working well. And then where people are struggling at that K through 2 level, what kind of supports do they need, either from their peers or from some of the coaches, whether they're our internal coaches or working with Quest R3 staff to support them as they continue to do that work. But what we also want to do is make sure that we don't just say this is a K through 2 topic and just leave it as if it's their responsibility in isolation, because it's not. And so what we really want to do is say, if you're a grade 3, 4, or 5 teacher, we want to first make sure that you really understand what has happened in the grades before you. What are the building blocks that have led kids to be successful up to their arrival in your grade level? So we want them to understand those practices and those learning targets. But we also want the intermediate teachers to identify the efficient ways to build on that instruction. For example, as kids move from more simple words to complex multisyllabic words, how do they apply the same strategies with a different vocabulary set? And then give teachers time to actually talk through, how do we do this work at the intermediate level? What are the connections and how do these things make sense when we bring it together? We also want to encourage saying, if all of our classroom teachers are doing this work, what is the work that needs to be done for our students who are struggling, right? And those students can fall into different categories of learners. Some of them are students who are behind and maybe not functioning like the average bears in their grade level, but some of them may be students with disabilities. And how are we using the tools in particular? How are we using really great reading resources to support their deep understanding of phonemic concepts? So for example, if I'm a second grade teacher, making sure that my kids understand what it means to use an open syllable versus a closed syllable strategy set when I'm decoding words within connected text. But also, how are the intervention teachers and the special education teachers reinforcing that and approaching it with a different perspective to help those kids really own that information and unlock the clues. So those are some of the really good examples of what we're doing with systematic implementation of these practices. But what are the tools that help us to get there? Well, support can come in a lot of ways, and we offer a lot of great resources through professional development and in-service, but we don't want to rely on that as the key tool, because some teachers can participate in in-service after school and some can't. And so what we want to do is we're building time into the expected parts of the day, where teachers are present at faculty meetings all together, and build continuous threads, whether they're for phonemic awareness and phonics instruction at pre-K through 5, or do we have the other teachers participating in this other part of the strategies, really making sure that they can bring information and resources back to their team about how to be really intentional with their data and helping guide those processes, and create differentiated faculty meeting cycles, so that whether it's a staff meeting through faculty meeting or through our superintendent's conference days, that we're targeting the interests and needs of each individual team within the building. We'll want to continue using our coaches, whether they're internal or through Quest R3. And we also want to continue to encourage something that's happened in our district in recent years, which is teachers visiting other teachers who are known to have expertise within our own district. You know, teaching can be very isolating, and so we want to make sure that teachers know and feel comfortable visiting into each other's classrooms. And this year we got to see that. And it was remarkable what impressions teachers came back with just by observing the experts down the hall. Really good strategies that are more sustainable than some of the other things that we might want to pursue or could pursue. Now that doesn't mean that visiting other schools is something that we wouldn't do. Sometimes we would, but what we found is we have a great deal of expertise within our own hallways already.
So at goal 2, this one was.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Let me go back a slide.
Yep.
I was just waiting for the end. I have a question about measuring success.
Mm-hmm.
How are you measuring building staff capacity?
I think with that, we'll be trying to take a hard look at, and I'd have to pull up the G7 what we had put in there exactly, but the idea of, has the professional development occurred that we're going to be introducing at faculty meetings, and then seeing it happen. I meet, like for example, the middle school, I meet with my team leaders every couple of weeks, talking about how are you utilizing that data as we go into, you're going into your team meetings, but also, Mr. Berkshire also has kind of bi-weekly meetings with each team levels, and that goes K-12, pre-K-12, that he's meeting on RTI cases on students, and we'll be utilizing Intervention Compass. I've already talked about how I was talking with a counselor who was on one of our RTI meeting groups, and how we're going to be able to pull up just one student's quick profile up on a screen for us in a small group to look at and discuss that student. You know, so it's kind of that qualitative completion of, at the end of the year, where are we at and how are we feeling with that intervention compass. You know, it's only going to grow stronger as we continue to use it throughout the year. But the biggest thing is going to be that rollout of it and making sure all staff feel comfortable and understand how to even just access it.
And a quantitative example of that is each year, and Mr. Berkshire can speak in more detail about this if he likes, but each year when we're reviewing our student data, we spend a tremendous amount of time bringing people together to talk through that data and really identify what supports do we need to put in place for kids as we move into the coming fall. And that process has taken days to complete, and I mean multiple days to complete. And this year, with the tools that have been recommended and presented before you, as we start to train teachers on how to use them, and Mr. Berkshire's walked people through that process in the elementary school, even though we were using multiple pieces of data, with better tools, that process went from days to organize the data and review it to hours. And those other days could be used for instructional purposes. So it's a quantitative measure about how we're changing capacity.
And I think that's one of the things, is the big thing that we hear at times is time to analyze the data and things like that. So the fact that we're going to have that one tool, one central place, should be more efficient. Mr. Berkshire, do you want to add anything to that or no?
No, I don't have anything further to add. Thanks, Pete. That was an excellent point.
I appreciate the answers. In what you have listed here, I don't see a direct measure of building staff capacity to utilize data. So that's why I asked, because I think that, I understand the qualitative analysis, but I think you need to have some quantitative measure also, so that, you're sure that you're actually building capacity.
I think
And
that comes back
the
to the,
improvements aren't just happening, as a function of other things going on.
sorry, Jay, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, sorry.
But I think that comes back to the question that some of these other pieces of measuring success, like state assessment scores, iReady data, those can be lagging indicators, right? So as we improve our craft as educators, well, what do we hope comes later, right? We hope that our students become stronger students, and stronger students who are more prepared to meet the state standards tend to do better on these tests and assessments.
Understood, but I think, again, that's an indirect measure, and the assessments and test scores could improve, but maybe you aren't necessarily seeing significant improvement in staff capacity to utilize data. And what I consistently hear in all these presentations is it's very heavy on collecting data and using it, which makes sense, for all the reasons have been explained. But to the extent that one strategy is building staff capacity to utilize data, and so much of the improvement plan rests on that capacity to utilize data, want to understand how you're quantitatively assessing improvement in the ability to use data. Directly measuring it as opposed to something that's an indirect measure that can be influenced by other factors also.
And we can look into developing that more.
Well,
I think also, if you look at the DCIP, there are specifics, and there are numbers associated with it and everything else. And that, I think, helps because it's a target, to then say, okay, are we reaching it or not? And so I think it's helpful to look at both presentations because that is detailed in what's part of the district.
thanks, Tracy. I guess I didn't look at the DCIP carefully enough. I missed that. I will look back. But Matt, I don't mean to say go do work. Go develop this thing. I know that's not an easy lift. And I also don't want to say I know better, and therefore because I think this needs to be done, go do it. As much as expressing a question / concern and trying to understand how you're measuring that one piece instead of asking you to go do something.
I think it's a good question for us to reflect on as we work. How is this improvement represented outside of the quantitative data?
To goal 2 here. So one of the things that, in terms of reviewing data from this past year, was that our chronic absenteeism rates across all 3 buildings increased. And again, as you start digging into the data, is kind of the root cause of that we focused on was the student lack of engagement and connections to school. Why are students not here, and how can we figure that out? So again, the strategy is to try to create an environment that will encourage student attendance. And one of the things across all 3 buildings that we'll be looking to do for this upcoming year in the DSEP there is to dive deeper into each individual student who was chronically absent last year and in years past. From the historical data from the district, we'll see if there's been a pattern over time, or was last year just a one-time thing for a student. Has there been a pattern or not? And along with looking at their absenteeism rate, we're also going to look at other data on that individual student who was chronically absent last year, like academic data, extracurricular involvement, behavior, mental health, and then also have individual meetings with 1 or 2 of these students at a time to talk to them about, why were you absent last year? Ask them some simple questions to see what is it that we can do to continue to help these students. Overall as a district, our attendance rate is in the high, low 90s there, which is good. But we definitely have some of these students at each grade level that are chronically absent. How can we individually start to work with each of them to meet their needs? Again, from this data, we'll look at trying to find interventions that are going to encourage the student to be at school more, and to try to also work to maybe remove barriers that are preventing them from attending school on a daily basis. One of the things throughout the year will be progress monitoring these students' attendance, which we we do on a weekly basis. We have weekly meetings in the middle school, some are bi-weekly depending, but we are monitoring these students' attendance throughout a school year. And we've always talked about, and I've said, and over the years, we say that relationships and connections to school are critical for student success. So, one of the things as each building group met there on those 2 days really was the idea of we've really got to dig deeper into each individual kid. Not just look at, okay, we have a group of people who are chronically absent, but because I think every kid is going to have a different story. And that's the story we got to figure out and try to have them have a better ending this upcoming year. This moment, turn over to Mr. Berkshire.
So, in addition to the work that Brian described across the 3 buildings, we also wanted to speak specifically to how the district will be supporting the elementary school with Ellis's strategy to relaunch the morning meetings activities. So by doing this, we hope to foster a strong bond between students and their classmates, teachers, and the school as a whole. By strengthening these connections and relationships, we'll be promoting a welcoming, safe, secure, and supportive school environment so that the students are compelled to attend school daily. So that's really at the heart of this culture goal. So it's twofold, where the strategy is to try and understand who's chronically absent, try to understand why, try to break down those barriers, but also work on our environment, work on making this a place that's very welcoming, very safe, very supportive, and very engaging.
Any questions with goal 2 there?
Just in looking at the DCIP on page 14, we're pretty aggressive in our school. What does MIP stand for? Like MIP?
But yes, the MIP, the measure of interim progress.
Thank you. Okay. As we're looking to be a third of what we currently are, and I'm all for it, but that's really aggressive.
Yeah, we have not received updated state accountability numbers yet. We did receive some preliminary plans about what it's going to look like, and what it seems is that they are still going to hold us to those targets that were established back off the 2018-2019 school year. So that school MIP is what we're looking at. That's for us. So that was originally set for us back in that period. So for accountability purposes, we are looking at those numbers that were set as targets for us and have not been adjusted up to this point. And I do agree with you that it's a tall mountain to climb. It's taller than any of the mountains that we have around here. But we want to see our attendance go back to pre-pandemic levels as a starting point, right? We want to get back to there. And so when we look at like our mid-year local target, you'll notice that in the DSIP that we've set a target based on a 3-year average prior to the pandemic, right? So by mid-year, we'll know we're on pace for that, getting to that pre-pandemic level if at the elementary school, the percentage of students who are chronically absent is about 16%. If we're about 15% at the middle school, and if we're at about 27% at the high school. So that's an adjustment that we've made for the, to deal with the reality of where we are, reality of what last year was, reality of the year before, and so on and so forth.
So just understand then the 22-23 school MIPS were set by SED pre-pandemic.
That's correct.
Interesting.
And ironically, last year in 21-22, in middle school, for example, we were at 8% chronic absenteeism. But that was because students could be home attending remotely classes every day too. So there was just that false sense with some things at times also last year.
Prior.
Yeah.
2021 or 21-22?
Hybrid.
Oh, yeah,
The hybrid.
2020, 2021.
Another year passed.
Yes.
Got away from you, Brian.
I know. So,
Time flies when you're having fun.
yes, exactly, Duncan.
All right.
Anything else with goal 2? Okay, all right, goal 3, community. So a lot of our community strategies and stuff at times are based off a lot of our perception data. And again, looking at perception data from this past school year, 21-22, there were concerns across the district regarding communication between school and home. Digging into the data even some more, it seemed like there are, common things that came up where there's multiple resources that are available, but not really one primary place or way to update it. And then also kind of either school personnel or buildings were communicating kind of inconsistently. So, how could we kind of tighten that up more and have there be that one central place, or how can we continue to keep folks and people on that one central place where information will be for them? In discussion with some of the parents, that were in my group, it was, I'm trying to, on Sundays, plan my weekly calendar with my son on when he's going to be staying after school, after school help, but I can't dig it up and stuff. So it's that idea of it's there, but how can we either improve access, finding things on the website, or also be better about, as a building, communicating, every couple weeks or something about, hey, don't forget, after the help's posted on the website if you're interested in planning. So one of the things that we're really looking at is, how do we improve that communication, that two-way communication? What are some of the practices that we can start implementing or improving upon? District-wide, we're looking at trying to organize a website that will allow easy access to information and their better two-way communication so that parents aren't feeling like they're missing out on things. And then also to create some sort of, early in the year here, administrative survey just regarding communication practices, which would be separate, I think, from our regular perception survey. And as I said, that our parents in July really gave us some great insight into things they felt and have heard either from other families or just their own personal struggles they've had with understanding some of the communication. Some of the key areas at Ellis, the Seesaw will become the pre-K 5 to 5 tool for parent-teacher communication. I don't know if you want anything else to that, Mr. Mahan?
I do. So for our pre-K through 5th grade families, as we were well poised when COVID struck to move to our digital tools because we were starting to use those prior to COVID. And Seesaw was one of those tools that we used very heavily already at the primary level with our K through 2 students. But we were using other tools with grades 3, 4, 5. And if you're an elementary parent, certainly parents understand different schools may have different tools, but if you have multiple kids in the same building, it's really confusing if your teachers are communicating in all different ways with families. And so one of our activities this year will be to align our practices so that all of the pre-K through 5 teachers are using Seesaw as a communication tool. But in order to make that a two-way device, like Mr. Reeve is saying, what we really want to be mindful of is making sure parents understand how they can use that tool. So that, for example, if a teacher sends out a message and a parent wants to respond, the response is actually going to the teacher, not necessarily to the entire group of classroom parents, which could be a barrier to some really important conversation. And so by better educating parents about what the tool does and does not do, and if they understand how that we're going to be using the tool, that is a way to encourage more communication back and forth as one of the primary ways that we'll communicate. But also the whole idea of just making sure that as we bring new teachers into our organization, like this year we've had retirements, we've had resignations, we want to make sure that we continue to enculturate those people into the practices of using these tools and using it in a consistent manner. So again, this year, as we spoke during our days of reviewing the data, teachers and Mr. Berkshire and I discussed, it's important that we as a school have common expectations about how frequently teachers are reaching out to their parents. So for example, quick messages every 2 weeks saying, dear parents, this week we had so much fun while we learned about X, Y, and Z. We want to celebrate that A, B, and C occurred. And then next week, you can help your student by preparing them for the following. Some simple information like that. Parents told us bullet it where possible, don't make it long. We don't want revamping websites, just bulleted information that's digestible from their phones would be a huge step as far as communication coming from the school back to parents. And that would empower parents to know how to better formulate their own questions about how they want to respond back to the teachers. That was an outcome of some of the work that we did regarding Seesaw.
And then also the middle school, again, it was the idea of like, sitting with some of the parents that day, we were able to point to them where there was things on the website that were helpful. Like, yeah, there's a place that has a nice little video and shows you how to understand Google Classroom. Well, a lot of them didn't know that. So that idea of how are we communicating out kind of clearer directions about, hey, either through teachers about things in their own classroom and tools they're using, like a Google Classroom, or just as a building of what is going on, what are some of the after school activities and things like that that parents can find on the website. And are we, instead of like putting long drawn out videos and stuff like that, because people didn't want to be burdened with tons of emails, which during COVID we did have quite a few of that. So it's trying to find that balance, but also making it feel like people have a true understanding of what's happening daily in the school. And that's really our goal from some of the survey. And we're going to meet, this in September here and talk with the rest of the faculty about just what are some more of the consistent practices and what are the key things we need to get out to help parents in the middle school make sure they're understanding where things are day to day in the building. From the high school level, again, they're definitely on board with the website being a little more user-friendly, but a couple other things that they had added into this was the idea of, at the beginning of the school year, welcome back information that will really assist parents in understanding how to support the child's learning at the high school level. So they are looking at, as a BLT and a faculty kind of coming together and really creating some documents that they want to get out to families in September to make sure their children are successful in high school. But then also just the idea of communicating through just positive comments and how can they continue to really push and actually track the Spartan cards that they're getting out about positive messages about students. So again, just trying to build more of that positive culture, making students and families feel like they're a part of the building on a daily basis. Questions on that at all?
So going forward from tonight, pending final approval of the DSIP, we will get to work. The next steps include sharing of this information, setting formal progress monitoring calendars and record-keeping documents, establishing formal timelines and assigning resources. We start talking about specific people, right? Who's going to be doing this work? Reserving faculty meeting dates, putting things on the calendar. This is going to happen when? Scheduling sessions with consultants and outside resources, those experts that we work with as a district that help us as administrators transfer knowledge to our teachers and support work. Those pieces are all part of our next steps. And of course, being reflective and responsive as we go through the school year with our district improvement plan, right? An improvement plan is an ever-evolving document. As we move through the year, things may change. We might need to adjust. When we start doing progress monitoring, when we get to a certain point, our numbers may be way off, and things might not be happening the way we want. We might want to make an adjustment on it. Something that seemed viable in July may not be so viable in November. How do we make an adjustment for that, right? And so it's a continuous process throughout the course of the school year, but these would be our immediate next steps. Before I open it up to final questions, I wanted to revisit this slide with the alignment pre-K through 12 from the difference between the 21-22 plans and the 22-23 plans. When we present school improvement plans in September, you're going to hear a lot of information that's overlapping, right? We're gonna have a lot of things that are gonna be repeated that we got into detail on tonight. And that reflects this work right here and this mindset and this approach, that we have that increased alignment among the buildings, that we are focusing in on these areas to improve and doing these things at Ellis, doing these things at the middle school and doing these things at the high school. And the district level support staff is supporting those things to make them happen. We've consolidated, we now have fewer strategies to allow for more focus. So, other questions? I know there were some as we went along. Any questions as we get to the end?
So it was submitted to SED.
That's
Okay.
right, on July 27th, I believe.
Okay. And so now we just execute?
We do. We wait for, SED will give us feedback. And like we said, these plans are ever evolving and the state recognizes that. So they could give us feedback and give us a question about something that we have in there and ask us to think more about that. And that's part of the process too.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm going to move us to our action items. I'm going to combine 7.1 and 7.2. I need a motion to approve the minutes of July 11, 2022 organizational meeting, as well as the minutes of the business meeting.
I have Eric and Jay.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I need a motion to accept the Committee on Special Education recommendations.
Eric, Duncan,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Dave. Thank you.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the finance reports for the month ending June 30th, 2022, as well as a set for July 31st, 2022.
Eric, second. Duncan, thank you.
Any discussion?
I have one question for Janet. Janet, on your budgetary transfers, could you explain, I'm sure it's a simple answer, all those coming out of health insurance and going into salaries, what's that generally about?
When we did the budget, I budgeted $100,000 in the health insurance line for negotiations.
Okay.
So, because at the time of the budget, there was no ratification yet. So I put $100,000 in there to help pay for whatever salaries we needed.
Well, that's where you hit it.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the personnel agenda.
Eric, a second. Jay, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the resolution to create and establish a charitable fund.
Duncan and Jay.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the transfer to capital reserve.
Duncan and Eric.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to adopt the resolution for the Greenville Central School District Board of Education's use of video conference to conduct board meetings if a board member is unable to physically be present due to extraordinary circumstances.
Jay and Duncan, no, Dave.
Dave? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I need a motion to adopt the three policies, 4170, 6372, and 7200.
Dave and Eric.
Any discussion? Duncan, was that a question?
No,
or
I
you-
was trying to second it, but somebody
Okay.
beat me to it.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And so the staff technology usage then takes care of something that we needed to address. I'm going to, let's see, I need a motion to approve the district goals and the district comprehensive improvement plan for 22-23.
Jay and Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the district safety plan for 22-23.
Eric, need a second? Dave, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the building level emergency response plan for 22-23 school year.
Dave and Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I need a motion to establish the tax warrants for the 22-23 school year.
Jay? Second. Eric?
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to accept the 22-23 bus routes.
Jay? Need a second? Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the agreement between this Greenville Central School District and the County of Green for services pertaining to COVID testing. And just as a reminder, there is no cost. This is from a grant.
Okay. Jay and Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the Questar 3 initial service contract with the Greenville Central School District for the 22-23 school year.
Duncan? Need a second? Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the intermunicipal agreement between the Greenville Central School District and Caro Durham Central School District for transportation of Greenville students to Wildwood Latham for the 22-23 school year, as well as this past summer.
Jay? Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the contract of transportation extensions for special education routes for the 22-23 school year.
Eric? Second? Jay?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the transportation agreement between the Greenville Central School District and Barbara Rivetti for providing transportation to and from Westmere Elementary School in Albany, New York.
Eric? Need a second? Jay, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the bid awards for the amount of $622.50 to Auctions International.
Eric? Need a second?
Second.
Duncan, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to award the bid to Gallo Construction Corporation in the amount of $164,780 for field drainage work at the middle school, high school.
Eric? Need a second? Jay?
Any discussion? No.
Mike,
Wait, just use the microphone for the recording.
Mike,
Sorry.
Michael, can you explain to us exactly what is this? I really don't understand.
This addresses the drainage issues that we've had in both the softball field and baseball.
Oh, it's on the fields, it's
Yes.
not here.
Correct.
Okay, all right, okay.
A question also. What warranty is associated with the work? Do you know offhand?
I don't know, usually it's a 1-year warranty, I believe. Rich? Yep.
1 year from date of completion?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
My comment is, I'm opposed to this. I plan on voting no. In fact, if I had 10 votes, I'd vote 11 no. I wondered if there's any colleagues on the board that be interested in having our lawyers pursue this. For this kind of money is ridiculous, I think. It's either poorly designed or poorly built. Can only be one of the two. Because they started from scratch. And I understand, I'm gonna hear that from the lawyers or from colleagues, it's not worth pursuing. It'll cost more in legal fees than this money. If that's the case, it's still ridiculous. Our warranty took place or expired during a time when it wasn't being used because of COVID. And that gives us, I believe, some case. But on a second note, Mike or Rich, the remedy I've heard is, are we still talking about boring and filling boreholes with sand? Is that what this involves? What are they talking about doing now?
This is what they're going to do is put drainage on the other side of the infield dirt. And again, I believe outside of right before just the warning track is where the drainage is.
In the center of the warning track, they're going to pitch the whole warning track down and put a drainage at the bottom of that.
Rich, can you just come to the microphone? 'Cause no, thank you.
On the warning track, they're going to dig down and slope it all in, put a 4-inch drain in the center of that, and then pitch it all out. So when all the water comes across the field, it goes into the warning track, goes down into the drain, and goes out of the warning track. They're also going to run a trench drain around just outside of the infield, bring that around to the outside by the fence, and run that all the way down to the outfield to meet up with the warning track. There was no drainage put in the original project. It was all supposed to slope off and run off, but it hasn't done that, so. If it had been in the original project, we would have paid for it in the original project. We're just paying for it now rather than then.
Oh, that's ridiculous. I'm not
That's
arguing with you. They didn't expect it to rain. I mean, I just think this is outlandish. If they're planning on creating a baseball or softball field in upstate New York where snow melts, there's hydraulic pressure that forces water wherever it wants to go, and it does rain in April and May when we play baseball in this part of the country, there should have been drainage in there. So I'm hearing that it's a poor plan. If it was planned to have a slope, then it wasn't sloped correctly, or pitched correctly, then it was poorly constructed. But again, my original statement was it's one or the other. So somebody's at fault. But our taxpayer, my next question will be, where is this money coming from? Because my next question is, our taxpayers have to remedy someone else's problem when they should be stepping up and fixing it.
I absolutely agree with you, Dave. You know, it seems the same way to me, that it's poor design or poor construction, both. And I remember I believe we talked about this before, and you know, I completely agree. It seems that if it is poor design, poor construction, I don't think it's right that because, you know, for the reason you said, you know, it wasn't used, we didn't discover the problem until after the warranty, then now we're out of luck. So, I mean, if there's any sort of legal remedy, and I think that what we heard is that, you know, may not be worth the poor in terms of the cost to pursue it versus what we might get, I'm still interested in going after it because I don't think it's right that the taxpayers have to pay. That said, for this, I mean, I'm concerned about fixing the problem that we have, and I'm worried that if we wait for any potential litigation to resolve to use that, you know, to fix it, then it could be a long time before it gets fixed. So I hate spending the money on this for those reasons. And I would like to see, if possible, like, you know, if there is any legal claim, you know, to pursue it. But again, I also want to see this get done in a faster time than we can do through litigation.
I agree. My vote is not in support of, or a lack of support of getting it fixed.
Sure.
So we can use the fields, but there's a tremendous amount of money put into creating those things. My other concern is if the baseball and softball fields aren't working, the previous board member, Mike, had huge concerns over the track. So is that a ticking time bomb also, and we're just gonna fix that on our own as well. But again, my other question was, where is this money coming from?
So back in the May board meeting, we had a whole bunch of budget transfers from year-end money. So that money has been earmarked with last year's money. So that money's sitting there right now. So there's the board transfers that showed where that money came from.
Okay, so contingency money, funds on this project are, I'm assuming are all gone. And I don't know what the legal requirements would be, but I would suggest, and it's horrible that we would have to do this, but I would suggest that maybe we retain some of those if this kind of thing is going to continue to happen. And this school has a habit of these things happening. Maybe some of you don't remember, we built a softball field that is now buried by a track, and we built a baseball field that was now buried by a track that we rarely got to use because of the same reasons. They flooded. We had a baseball coach that spent his own money on trying to remedy some of the drainage issues. This is a real concern of mine. That to me, that's a lot of money. Maybe for the schools not.
I'm supportive of your point also. It seems to me that the construction outfit that we had, I've forgotten her name, but they went out and retained an outfit out of Troy as a subcontractor to give them input on the baseball field in particular, if not the softball field, but I know the baseball field. And if there was no drainage built in, boy, I can hear Mike sitting right here going crazy about drainage. I agree we have to get it fixed. I understand that we had leftover money from last year that we allocated for this going forward, knowing we had to do something. But I'd like to find out from Jeff, I know he said, you know, it's a protracted process and one that doesn't suggest a great hope for
what we can do is talk to Jeff separately.
We need
So,
to really
you know,
understand
we can
what
do
we
that. I would just like to keep that for something like an executive session so that we are not tipping our hand. I think that what we're hearing is that we're all in agreement that it's a significant expenditure. We're all in agreement that it does need to be fixed. And then it sounds like several of us would like to see, again, have another discussion about what the options are. I think that now that we know what the total amount came in at, then we can have another discussion.
Okay, may I just ask why you think this is appropriate for an executive session?
Because it's a discussion with the lawyer.
Oh, Oh, when are you talking?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Absolutely, I do not want to,
No, now I understand what you're saying, I just didn't understand.
but I think that right now, we have a situation in front of us where we have the money because we allocated and we reserved it from last year's funding, knowing that it was coming in. We're in a situation where it needs to be fixed. And so I appreciate, so the vote is really, do we fix it or not? That's what it comes down to. We are voting to fix it or not.
Do we have a motion to accept?
I have Eric and Jay, so we
Yeah,
just need to.
so now we just have,
discussion.
but before we do, let Dave go.
Yeah, if you put it that way, I will.
But what we can say is we will explore options. So now what the motion is to award the bid to Gallo Construction to fix the fields.
We're done discussing and now we're voting?
Unless there's something specific that you wanted to, so, yes, so we are now voting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I need a motion to approve the surplus items. Thanks, Rich. That are listed here.
Eric, second? Going once? A
Second.
Jay, thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Curious about
Oh,
the surplus blood and guts.
Yes, there's a lot, a lot of books.
It's not a discussion point, it's
There
fact
you
check. No
All in
discussion.
favor?
Aye.
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 All right, so let's see, moving on now to discussion points. We have had several staff members or positions that need to be filled. And so there was discussion of having an additional meeting for the August 29th, is that correct? So this is more an FYI that in order to have the appropriate staff, that we are looking at having a fairly brief meeting on the 29th. So if you could just mark your calendars, and that way we'll be staffed accordingly. Oh, is anyone on vacation?
I came back, I can go again.
Sure. So just mark your calendars, please. We'll have more on that later. Now I'm going to turn it over to Michael Bennett to talk about an exchange student and the situation.
Yes, so we were approached by Education First to have another foreign exchange student. As our policy reads, right now we have one, and we've committed to Rotary for having one coming in. So we wanted to put that out to everyone to discuss whether or not we would like to waive that one foreign exchange student only and have a second foreign exchange student register with us.
So what I'm hearing is we have one for this year already. An outside party came and said, we have another one?
Yes.
Correct. We just have a cap on it that either has to be
Waived
for the year.
Correct. Yes, Jay.
Do you know why there's a cap on one? Any?
I can give you a little bit of background. That was several superintendents ago, and when the policy was written, then it was just written with the number one. So,
Am I hearing a motion to potentially review that policy? I don't know if I can call that as a motion.
How about interest?
We're definitely interested in looking at that, but Duncan?
My question, we did get one from Rotary this year?
Yes.
That one come through, so this
Yep.
is this is the one from Germany?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
and is it through an official organization? Okay.
If we need a motion to waive the policy for this year only, to accept the second exchange student, I so make that motion.
Second that.
Any discussion related to that motion that is currently on the floor?
Just to be clear, Mike, when I asked you if you have any idea why we have that policy, I didn't hear a compelling reason to not waive it. The question is, like, just to be clear, is there any reason you can think of why we'd be concerned if we have 2 or 3 or 10 exchange students? Maybe at a certain number it gets to be unmanageable. But
Yeah, I think that, and I don't know the history to why the one, but my belief would be if we had booming numbers in our cohorts where we were busting at the seams and we're at capacity in classrooms, having more than one could potentially put contracts over numbers as far as how many kids can be in a classroom. That's the only thing that I can think of why you would cap it at 1.
Okay.
All right, so then we have a motion to make the, Duncan, would you repeat it please? Then to waive the current policy of 1 exchange student for the current year. Okay?
2.
2.
Are we opening up to have more than 2?
For this one.
I cannot anticipate this late in the school year
Okay.
having another one coming in.
Do you want to specify 2? We'd have to just
No.
change, okay,
No.
so fine. All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay, so that motion passed. So then, Mike, are you all set? Okay, all right. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Duncan, who is going to talk about the open forums. And this is part of our process with goal setting that we've been working on.
As way of background, we set goals this year, and one of those goals was transparency in communication between us as a board, and parenthetically then, the actions of the superintendent and the staff as they're part of this board, or as part of board meetings, and the public in general. And there were different approaches. I was asked to look at a change in the way we do open forums. So I'm going to read this only because we have people perhaps looking at YouTube. The information gathered and presented at our last meeting makes it pretty clear that almost unanimously other districts do not engage in an interactive session with the public during business meetings. In fact, as I noted, a representative NISBA indicated that protracted business meetings were a major reason why superintendents left a district for another. Perhaps going beyond my particular assignment, I think the idea of 2, 3, or 4 open forums during the year is preferable rather than opening up a business meeting to what could be protracted interactions between board members, the superintendent, staff, and the general public. Having said that, I still believe that we need to provide an opportunity for the public to raise questions or concerns that goes beyond just listening to them. If the consensus of the board is such that we need to provide an opportunity for addressing issues that are of significant concern to the general public, I suggest that we do so only during the closing open forum. The general guidelines for this session will make it clear that issues raised will be addressed at the next business meeting, not in an interactive mode. Our commitment to the public would be that issues raised would be researched and added to the next business meeting's agenda. The public would have an opportunity to review the detail presented and comment at the subsequent business meeting's open forum,
parenthetically I'm going to say, which is supposedly we asked the public to keep their comments or questions related to issues that are on that particular agenda. While this approach may, in some cases, may in and of itself present some problems, we would make it clear that when we instituted this, we did so that it is on an experimental basis and would be subject to changes or elimination as necessary. And what I really mean by that is if this didn't work out the way we planned, and that is to address the issues, not necessarily immediately when raised, but in a timely period, that timely being the next business meeting. If that turned out to be, again, an issue upon which things got way out of hand. In other words, as I envisioned it, people could make comments, okay, in the open forum. If we continue the open forum as it is now, where we ask people to contain their remarks to 5 minutes or less, and it's only 30 minutes, I don't see that it goes outside what we've already committed to. So I don't want any action on this tonight. I think we have to look at it in the broader aspect of the things we did. And, you know, maybe the answer isn't to do it at the next business meeting, but to have a way of which people could ask and have it done in a forum. So this is just one suggestion that I think has to go into the bucket where we look at the broader issues, the open forums or whatever. So it's information at this point.
Does anyone have thoughts, reactions that they want to mention while they're thinking?
I'll think about it. I mean, it sounds interesting, the idea that possibly, you know, we would open up the back end of the meeting and say, okay, now we'll interact with you.
Actually, I don't think, if you read that into it, I don't mean that. At the open forum, if they had something which they would like explained in greater detail or have a dialogue on it, that's great. We take it. We do the research that's necessary, which puts some, you know, some emphasis or some issues on the shoulders of Mike and staff. To get that, we make, like we had a presentation tonight, okay? We have on the agenda the next meeting. We don't get interactive in a closing session. We accept the data. We don't try to give and take. We accept it as something that, you know, there's an element of concern out there, and we do what we need to do to put it on the next business meeting. And then the comments, the public, Joe Jones brought up the concern. He sees what we're saying as an institution, as a board, okay? It's on the board agenda, the board can discuss it, debate it, but he'll have his input, having read the outlines that have been presented by staff as part of the agenda. Joe Jones can make his comments. That's not what I asked, or I want to go deeper, or you're all wrong here, I really think you need to do that. Whatever he wants within his 5 minutes at the open forum, and then it'll be on the board, and the board can either accept what was presented by staff or ignore it. And I'm not committed to this. This is the only way I would suggest that we do anything to open up that interaction, because as I tried to point out again, I went out last month, virtually everyone contacted. I think there was 17 different school districts were represented in the material I put out last. Our attorneys were represented. NISBA was represented. I don't know how to say NICOS. Is it NISCUS, which is the superintendent's support group.
were interrogated, were questioned and responded in the negative. Don't do it, okay?
Right.
So this is the alternative, or maybe an alternative, if the board agrees.
Thank you for the extra clarification. So no, what I'm hearing is that somebody comes, they present, we hear, we listen, we accept, and then it goes on the next agenda. We respond, per se, and then if they have anything to add, they can do it on the second closing forum of that meeting.
Yeah, well, at the opening forum, they have a right to address anything that's on the agenda. So if they saw something on the agenda that didn't address what they wanted, they could make that clear and say, no, you missed the point, you missed the whole thing. Or, okay, that guy, Joe Jones or whatever I said, it was, if he got up again at the closing forum and said that, you know, that's all BS, I don't want any part of it, okay, I want you to come back and do something different next time. Then if that's the kind of thing that gets out of hand, and if that kind of thing happened on a regular basis, then I think we would get away from it.
Okay, so be listening, continued listening.
Right. That's really for when we decide exactly what we're going to do.
Okay, all right, thank you, Duncan.
Yep.
Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you regarding the student representative.
Yeah, so this has been something that we were hoping to catch by May of last year. This is something that we needed to vote on that we were going to do. So one of the things I heard was let's put a little bit more bones to the proposal and taking a look at what some of the other school districts did. So we put this together, put it out in draft form to get some feedback. I know that Jim is not with us in the meeting tonight, but he has sent back some thoughts already in regards to GPA, maybe lowering that a little bit to cast a wider net. But this is just an opportunity for you guys to have something to look at. I did hear from Angela as well, and she liked the way it looked. But again, this is something that is a collection of what some other schools are currently doing. And you know, if we move forward with a capital project vote and we look at this being something that we put out for the December vote, because the public has to agree to having a student member, I want to make sure that we have our system in place so that when the time comes, we're ready to move on it. So I would appreciate any feedback that you may have on this. I'm not married to this format, but I think it gives us something that gets at students who are interested to sit and be a member of the Board of Education.
Mike, does the candidate have to have an attendance rate of exactly 90%?
No, we could put at least 90%. It's a great question. Thank you.
It is a great question.
If it's 91 or 89.
Don't worry, I never had 90%.
And Mike, how do you define like leadership experience?
That could be anything within the athletic world, whether it's outside of work or outside of school, if they are in Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, if they've had some leadership exposure that way, if it's within student council, if it's within an extracurricular club, are they an officer in student council? You know, anything that they could exhibit as taking charge and leading, whether it's a project, whether it's a group of other peers.
Go ahead, Duncan.
I just read it and I have to go find it. So describe, no. Okay. It's number 3, be prepared to make a brief student report at BOE meetings, specifically addressing topics of importance resulting from meetings with principals and students. I would like to leave the last piece off.
Can you read
The last phrase, at each GCSD school. Okay, and maybe put another sentence in. Over the years,
we would expect reports from all 3 schools. In other words, not force him monthly to have a report where he or she has had to go to all 3 schools, principals, etc., and understand dynamics.
So throughout the course of the year?
Throughout the course of the
Just
year,
to-
all 3 schools
Yeah.
should be represented.
Yeah.
Something to that effect.
Okay.
Other than that, I like it.
My issue is if we don't have a student that is willing to do it, then I don't want to force it. That it's really a matter of finding someone who is excited about it, because they do have to participate and attend the meetings and everything else. So I don't just want to create it just to create it. It's really finding that right fit. And if there is an opportunity and we have the perfect student for it, or something to that effect, then absolutely. Duncan?
Since we have to have community approval to do this, if everybody's comfortable with this, I would like to see it put forth and see how many candidates we actually get, with the proviso that we're doing this assuming that we will get public approval in December. And that, you know, that way when we went to the public, we could say, we've been looking into this, we need your approval to do it. Okay, but we have had, you know, 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever the number of students who would indicate they'd be interested in doing this. And we would develop the presentation as such. This would be a good thing to have as part of the presentation to the public.
Duncan, I have a question. I understand the concern that asking a student to meet with principals and students from each school on a monthly basis could be burdensome. How about on a semester basis, though? I mean, that would be twice per year.
That'd be fine.
Just
Okay.
in the interest of trying to hear from each of the schools.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't, you know.
I understand monthly is.
Yeah,
is a
and
lot.
not only that, but the principals too, you know? I mean, maybe study hall, I could do it, that kind of thing. But that's asking them to, I would like to see those kind of things be, you know, something with some meat on the bone. And if you want to have meat on the bone 3 times in 1 month, we don't do that.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is that we'll be asking for a monthly report.
Right.
But over the course of the semester, they should have reported on each school at least once.
Right. And if they wanted to give a, you know, as we put it in, if you wanted to come in with something more than that, if you wanted to have, you know, a report that indicated issues at all 3 schools every month, that's great. But at least once every semester is fine.
Yeah, just minimum standard. Great. And then one question at the very end, the yet to be determined. I mean, that's clear, but do you have preliminary thinking about who the yet to be determined would be?
I do not, and I really wanted to leave that up to, you know, I'm not sure how involved the Board of Education wants to get at this level. I think that when you're working with students and having to make, if we have that situation where we have 4 or 5 candidates and you're only choosing one of them, to have the Board of Education actually have to have that conversation with those other 3 or 4 that don't get it. I don't know if that's where the board wants to be with that, but at the same time, I didn't want to sit here and say that the board can't be part of that process.
Well, I don't remember, I'm sorry, just a quick follow-up. I don't remember when Angela was presenting what she found from other places, how they did it. So I understand if there's any, I'm sorry, the question, kind of a 2-part question is, you can see doing an interview and selection process where it's with or without the board or administrators or teachers or some combination doing interviews and selection, or just a vote by the students, if the student meets whatever the criteria are, and there's an election essentially, and the students are electing the representatives the same way the community is electing us to the board to represent them, or even a combination where there's like a screening process, to make sure that the candidates put up for election by students, really seem to fit the criteria, and then we step away. I'm not necessarily suggesting anyone, but those seem like 3 options at the outset. And personally, again, I'm curious to hear what Angela found, because if there's a typical way of doing it, that's probably a good way to follow. But I kind of like the idea of having the students be able to pick their representative to the board.
Yeah, I know that the couple of school districts that I know have had elections by the student body to do it as well. So that's certainly an option.
I guess that would also be a K-12 election?
No,
That'd be
it's gotta be,
kind
it's gotta be.
The high school only, I think, just to be realistic. So then next steps for this one would be to then talk to the principals and see if there's interest among the students and how many.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I've shared this with the instructional cabinet as well, so I think it's more of an opportunity now to, I like the idea of gauging early on how much interest there would be in going through this process, and then getting that feel early in September or October, so that when this comes alive, then we could potentially do something right
And it
from there.
bolsters the presentation to the public. It bolsters the presentation to the public to say, we've been looking at this for a
Yep.
while, we move forward, and we've got this amount of interest.
Yep.
All good candidates.
Sure. Yep.
And so, I'm sorry, Tracy, just to think through this. So sometime October, November, the board will vote to approve some proposal that would then go to the community for the December vote with the capital plan. And then, assuming that that is approved, we would then have, I guess the earliest we'd have a student representative would be January, if the process is lined up kind of carefully in
Correct.
advance and tightly. Is that, but I don't know if that's, I don't remember what we were thinking before, what you're thinking, Mike. Is that what you're thinking, that this person could start as early as January, or do you think that's too aggressive trying to get them in place?
Well, it really depends on what that interest looks like and how much we can get done prior to that December vote. Because if we can get that December vote to say, yeah, we want to do this, we'll approve it. I'm thinking that we'll have to accept it at the January board meeting after the vote, or a late December board meeting, and then have that person ready to be appointed for January. So I can see it possible, and at the latest February.
Okay.
All right, so then let's move us on to the reception for tenure appointments and new hires. Mike, you're up again.
Wonderful. So one of the things that we want to take a look at, I know that we had a number of retirees in the springtime, and we presented and had a nice little presentation for them. So as we move into normally I think we would do our tenure folks around that time too, but we decided, because that was going to be a large group of folks between the retirees and the tenure folks, push the tenure people off until officially they've started school and they are now tenured, to do a reception for those folks, as well as do something for our new employees, so you guys have a chance to put a name with a face. You've approved them at the board level on a piece of paper, but to be able to get them up in front of you and introduce them to you, I think would be a great opportunity to show off what a board meeting looks like to those new folks, but also to recognize the hard work and the dedication of those individuals who've gotten that tenure appointment. I think it goes a long way in showing them how much we appreciate the hard work that they're putting in and want to be able to be supportive of them moving forward.
So would this be similar, that we would do it at 5 o'clock or right before the meeting? Like-
Yes, I envision a situation in which we are welcoming them in to a 5 o'clock. Same as we did last time with some refreshments and some light snacks and things like that, and then acknowledging them during the accolades portion of the board meeting, if the board's willing to do that.
Yes, and I think welcoming them with some baking from Tracy would be a really nice way to welcome them to Greenville.
It works.
If that's feasible.
Yes, Tracy's baking certainly works.
Absolutely, I think it's a great idea. I think that unfortunately we had to move away from it for the past couple of years, so if we can bring it back, I think that people like the human interaction and the recognition and just being able to identify a person's face and so forth. And, you know, we're really nice people for that, so thank you. Does anyone have any items for a future meeting? Okay.
I really don't have an item, but I have a question. When are we going to get together and try to figure out what we're going to do vis-a-vis open forums or a forum or whatever? When are we going to lock those up?
We could set a separate date, or I was envisioning that we were using it kind of during the discussion. So by breaking it out into the specific areas, I mean, unless we needed a 3-hour meeting, then I didn't see the need necessarily for having a separate Saturday meeting or something like that. So, but tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I don't think we need a meeting either, okay? But we need to know, I mean, we need to do something. Dave presented things on an open forum, or on having a scheduled forum. I think he said 2 or 3. I said 2, 3, or 4, whatever it was, because I couldn't remember exactly. We need to make a commitment to ourselves to go ahead and do that if we want to do that.
Absolutely, and like one of the things, Dave, we had asked for a meeting in July so that we could kind of sit down and put together a, we have to decide on the topic and some of the logistical issues. I think we had talked about October. So in fact, one of the things on my list is we need to start doing that, because if we are going to have, we talked about having a period of time before the board meeting. We do need to select a topic. There was some discussion about the budget as being a potential topic for conversation. So I was planning on kind of moving that forward for October. So that would be one of the things. I think that by breaking it up, people have been, like Angela and Jim have been working on the orientation. What I was envisioning for the open forum was putting it into the discussion, and you asked us to think about it. So at the next meeting, which tentatively could be August 29th, then to come through and say, okay, this is what we are proposing, this is what it will look like, and then we can start implementing it. Would that work?
I think we should meet.
Wait, just use, because we're recording, please.
I think we should meet for an hour or so before the meeting on the 29th, if you're available.
Okay.
Or if you think it's going to be more, I think we can hammer out the details in an hour.
Absolutely, yeah.
And anybody else that wants to come, can come.
Okay.
Well, if it becomes more than 4, you're a board meeting, so. So
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
under 4,
keep it under 4.
Yeah.
so 3.
I'll show up at 6.
There you go.
I was hoping, I like the idea of the forums. I really do. I was hoping that we could put a schedule together and say, October we're going to do this. I'm just throwing things out. January, we're gonna do this, okay? And, I don't know, May, we're gonna do this, okay? May's a bad day, or bad time, we got too many other things on, okay? April, we're gonna do this. The reason being, we would have the capability of getting that information out to the public on a, you know, the budget was a good one. I agree, that came up, and that would be a good one to have if there was a, you know, if we could get some interest. I think we had some discussions before about, you know, reserve for the top 25, you know, first 25, no more than 25, because we want to get interactive in it too. And people laughed at me when I said that, but it's kind of like selling on the under the table, so to speak. Really, is trying to get people to come in and get some interest in it. I'm a little concerned if we try to do it before a regular scheduled board meeting. That's my own feeling right now. You guys can hash that out, and if you want to do the budget that way, that's great. But my concern of getting any kind of a meeting that is, it would have to be, I think, at 4:30 or 5 o'clock. If we're going to have the board meeting at 6, or maybe we delay the board meeting that day, that might work better. My concern is if we get it too early, we don't get people who are in, you know, commute. Okay, if we kind of compress it to try to fit the rest of the schedule, then we lose some of the reasons we're trying to have an open forum, or you know, a forum to discuss this stuff.
I think before the meeting was just for the 29th to have a chit chat. I think the open forums are going to be a 3-hour discussion on a Saturday. Yeah. We'll pick the dates later, but I don't think we're going to have our open meeting forum thing before a board meeting. There's just not enough time unless you guys want to do a 9-hour thing. I'm thinking it's a separate day. The public comes.
So can we do that? We're going to have the 29th? Can we start early and just have this discussion before we do what we have to? Huh?
3 of you.
Tracy,
3 of them.
Dustin,
Oh,
and
okay.
Dave.
It's otherwise it becomes a board meeting.
Yeah.
3 of you.
29th, so what time on the 29th are we showing up? And let me add it to my calendar.
4:30.
4:30? All right, hold on. Mike, does that work for you? 29th.
Just for the record, I'm going to be with Jay.
Okay. You'll miss out on cookies. All right, so 4:30. Perfect, works. Duncan, does that work for your calendar?
That's fine.
Okay. All right, so then the objective on the 29th at 4:30 is to sit and hash out the details. Why don't we start with one and kind of see how it works before we start, and then we can modify for the other ones, if that works? Okay. All right, I'm just adding. Any other discussion points then for future meetings? Just a second. All right, then closing open forum. Please note the same guidelines apply as stated during the first open forum. Is there anyone that wanted to state any or say anything?
I have nothing.
Nothing, okay. Then I need a motion to adjourn the meeting. Sorry, that was fast.
Fastest left arm in the...
Exactly. Any discussion? All in favor?
Wait, who was the second?
I thought Dave.
I had
Duncan.
Dave? Okay. Duncan or Dave?
Me.
Okay, thank you.
Take your pick.
Stickler.
Both.
I have to have recorded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, now let me put it here.